everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well out there, and today we're going to head back to Stephen King adaptation territory. But before we do that, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here, I greatly would appreciate that. Also, as always, a shameless plug for my TeePublic page. I'll leave a link in the description box below. And today we're going to head back to the year of our Lord, 1990, for a movie based on a 17-page short story by Stephen King, and that film is The Graveyard Shift. I don't have this on Blu-ray or DVD. I actually have it on my Apple iTunes account, but I do have this VHS. I used to own this on VHS back when VHS were popular. I remember buying it from Suncoast Video, and this was the box art I had. And if you remember the Paramount label that they used to put on these bad boys, this I picked up. I got rid of all my VHSs, unfortunately, except for these three right here. Well, actually, these two. That one I bought off the same time I bought this one off my friend Phil from the Spook House podcast. Do me a favor, go over and subscribe to those guys over at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I also have a YouTube channel. I bought this off of Phil a couple years ago at Carolina Fear Fest. I've been using it in my background of my videos, but today it's going to be my little prop to hold in my hand as a physical piece of physical media. This film came out October 26th of 1990. It's rated R. It's only an hour and 26 minutes long, which is one of the strengths of this film. It does move at a shot, this movie. Had a budget of $10.5 million, and upon release it made 11.5 that Halloween time when it came out. And this film was shot very quickly. We'll get into that. But who directed this film was Ralph S. Singleton. Now, he'd been in Hollywood for a while, but the only other thing he ever directed before this film was 2 episodes of Cagney and Lacey in 85 and 86. This was his only theatrical film he ever directed. He hasn't directed since then, but he's produced films and production managed films. Matter of fact, he produced another Stephen King adaptation, Pet Sematary, in 89, and he produced Pet Sematary 2 in 1992. He also produced another 48 Hours with Walter Hill, Clear and Present Danger, Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis, Murder at 1600. This guy did a lot in Hollywood and other projects as well if you look at his IMDb. Now, in this film, we actually have a nice little cast here. David Andrews, who you've definitely seen in other movies. He was in Terminator 3, but he's in a bunch of TV work and other films. He plays John Hall. He's a drifter that comes into town, this little small town in Maine, and we'll talk about it. Kelly Wolf plays Jane. She's kind of like this tomboy, tough girl that works at this mill, the Bachman Mills. And Stephen Mock is in this film as Warwick. He is the guy who runs this mill for Bachman. And I love his performance. We'll talk about him. Andrew Divoff plays Damon in this film. He's one of the workers at this mill. And Brad Dourif, the great Brad Dourif, plays the exterminator. And he's great here as well. The cast is pretty badass here. The acting is really well done, except for a few moments of, I don't know, sometimes some of the lines delivered is not the greatest, but the main actors are fantastic here. And the acting overall is pretty damn good, or entertaining as could be. Very simple story. This is a creature feature. If you've ever seen one, we start off, we're introduced, we set up the mill through establishing shots at night with a full moon, with a cemetery, and we see this guy running the picker down in the basement. I should have did my best New England accent. The picker, you ever heard of picker? That's awful. Sorry, I used to live up there. Can't do a very good accent. But, and we see him get killed by something, and he falls into the picker and gets tore up. We're introduced to John Hall, who's walking into town, almost like a Western. This drifter comes out of nowhere, looking for work, and he goes to the mill and gets hired by Warwick, and he gets hired to run the picker. You ever run the picker? And it's a one-man operation as he sets up. So now he's working at this mill. And this big cleanup's coming up over the 4th of July weekend for double pay, which they make a point. This is a small town. People are struggling for money, and this mill is pretty much the only work that's available. They have a small restaurant and bar across the street. Very small town. They actually did shoot this in Maine. This is one of the few Stephen King adaptations that were actually shot in Maine. I wish I would have visited the locations while I was up there, because the mill still stands to this day. And we'll get into that. So anyway, as the plot goes forward, Warwick's getting a crew to head up this cleaning operation down in the basement, or they're going to get shut down by the local government. So John Hall signs up, Jane signs up, and they kind of like each other. So there's a love story brewing, although it goes nowhere because this movie is cut to the bone. Like, this movie is so, you couldn't afford to lose any more footage out of this movie because it moves really fast. And pretty soon, the monster has discovered this bat-rat hybrid monster that actually looks pretty good. I mean, they hide it, they only show parts of it, but I think it's a pretty well done, obviously done for real because this was 1990, and it looks pretty good. And the gore effects when they show it, I mean, this movie's not overly gory, but they do show some blood. They show some torn limbs, the leftovers after our monster gets defeated by John Hall, and pretty much all of our cleanup crew gets killed except for John. He survives and gets to walk out of the mill, and at the end the lady's coming out to put a hiring sign back outside the mill, and then we get that weird but awesome nonetheless song that goes over to credits, which is basically, it takes quotes from the movie from different characters, especially Warwick, puts a beat to it, and that's pretty much the ending that plays out throughout the cast credits. And I actually kind of like it, kind of dig it. It's a bizarre choice, has no reason to be here, but it's kind of badass all in its own right and very unusual in its own right. So what to like about this film? The cast, like I said, Stephen Mock as Warwick is great. He's not even the main antagonist. He's an antagonist, but he's not the main bad guy. It's this creature. But he doesn't just chew the scenery. He obliterates it. And I love his performance. This movie is worth watching just for his performance alone. I love it. I've loved it since I was a kid. I remember renting this from my video store of choice, Broad Street Video in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, often back in the mid-90s until I finally bought it from Suncoast Video when I finally started working and had my own money. I've always loved his performance. Brad Dourif, even though he's in this movie, but he's not, obviously he's like basically a side character, but he is phenomenal. Brad Dourif, I don't think is capable of giving a bad performance, and he gives a great performance here, especially his little monologue to John Hall in the basement when he comes, because he's the exterminator. He's trying to get rid of this rat problem. We see a ton of rats around this place, and he gives this monologue about in Vietnam what the Vietnamese would do, the Viet Cong would do to captured soldiers, and he delivers it with, I mean, Oscar-worthy precision. He's awesome here. Everybody else is good here. Kelly Wolf's good for what she's given to do, which isn't a whole lot. She's a tough girl, doesn't take any shit, but she likes John Hall. A few of her line deliveries are a little and there's some really bad ADR here. But overall, the acting is really well done, and the characters alone make this a worthwhile watch. I'm not here to tell you this is Misery or The Shining or, The Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile. I'm not telling you this is on that level at all, or The Dead Zone, but this is a pretty goddamn solid, fun creature feature. The creature itself, I like the creature. It's a little weird. I like the hybrid aspect of it. We don't get any explanations of where it came from. We could assume where it came from. All the little character interactions, I mean, we don't get much. Again, this is an hour, 26 minutes long. And from what I read, there was a longer cut. There was more of the love story between Jane and John, but they cut all that down. There was a shower scene with some nudity. That was all cut out. From what I read, if you ever see this on TV or over the years, if you've ever seen it on TV, a few little of the scenes were put back in. And this actually originally got an X from the MPAA. They had to make cuts to get the R rating, but they did cut this movie to the bone. And you could tell this moves, it just gives you enough, and it just moves at basically a runaway train's pace right till the end of the film. There is no fuss, no muss here. There's no bloat. I mean, this is cut to the bone. And actually, it's kind of one of its charms. I'd love to see the original cut of it, but honestly, the way it moves now, it works really, really well. On the downside, is this movie perfect? No, it's not. I mean, there's a lot to be desired with the story. It's a basic creature feature. So again, this is nothing that's going to blow you away. But I would say if you haven't seen it in a while and you don't remember, I would say give it a shot. I think it's streaming on Tubi, actually. And it's available. There's a Blu-ray from Scream Factory that you can get if you want to purchase this movie. This was actually shot up in Maine. I mean, the directing's pretty decent. I mean, Ralph Singleton did a serviceable job here. He gets the job done. There's some nice, I love the establishing shots of the mill. The production design, I love it. Feels like a small town. They actually did shoot in a mill in Harmony, Maine. They actually shot around the mill, in the mill. The basement wasn't there, though. The basement was shot in Bangor, Maine. They built a set at this water plant and this armory. They built the sets for that because there's really no basement to this mill. If you look at, there's some videos on YouTube of location. This one guy especially goes to the location of the mill, and there's really not a basement there, so they had to build that set somewhere else. That was basically the two main locations they shot in, Harmony, Maine, and Bangor, Maine. And again, I lived in Massachusetts for 7 years. I wish I would have took a road trip up and checked out the locations to this film. And the cemetery is really not there either. That was a set they built on site to get that opening shot, establishing shot of the mill with the full moon, the cemetery, and the mill in the background. I love the production design here. They really do sell the small town. This is the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of employment. Even without saying it, you just get it from the way it's shot and just the way it looks. You get that feeling of it. He's running this mill for Bachman, and even though people are disappearing and nobody seems to question it all that much, he just keeps moving forward to keep the mill running. That's all his only concern in this whole film, is just to keep the mill running. And you know, he loses his shit in the last part of the movie. Once the shit hits the fan, he just goes total apocalypse now, postal on everybody. But again, Stephen Mock gives a great performance. The name Bachman Mills was obviously a reference to Richard Bachman, Stephen King's pseudonym. He wrote a couple books under that pseudonym, so that's why they named the mill Bachman Mills. Again, this was based on a 17-page short story by Stephen King. Bartlett Mills in Harmony, Maine is where they shot that. That mill still stands. They still produce yarn there. But you can take tours there from what I understand. But if you're deciding to take a pilgrimage there, I would find out through any website you can when they're open for tours. But they do give free tours from what I've seen on videos on YouTube. Other than that, I don't got anything else on this film. This is a film I used to rent a lot from the video store. It's a film I've always enjoyed. Again, it's not perfect. It's not going to reinvent the wheel here, but it's a very solid, very fun, with some great performances, just fun performances, creature feature. At the end of the day, I would give Graveyard Shift a 7.5 out of 10. Yes, 7.5 out of 10 for Graveyard Shift. If you've ever seen this film, leave a comment down below, let me know. Hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share this video. I greatly would appreciate that. I'll be back soon with some more reviews, but until next time, bye.